I've worked with plants and animals in one capacity or another for most of my life. My husband and I became professional beekeepers, though, about 10 years ago. Before that, as Rich mentioned earlier, I am still an ISA certified arborist and a horticulturalist. And I'm just very concerned about what I see in the world around us, these challenges we're facing. I mean, not only with increased fire risk, but loss of biodiversity and conservation of resources. So thank you very much for having me here tonight. And I will try to get through this quickly so we can move on to roundtable and questions. So I'm just going to start with, we thought Fire Safe Marin produced a video. It's 6 minutes, and I think it very succinctly just talks about many of the things I would have talked about tonight. So let me just share my screen and we will watch that. Oh, here we go.
It's July 2019, and after a couple of years of very devastating fires in California.
I'm Bonnie Morse. I'm a beekeeper and a certified arborist. Today we're going to be discussing how to make your landscape both more resistant to wildfires while also protecting our pollinators. Increasing fire dangers are not the only crisis we are facing with the changing climate. We are facing unprecedented threats to biodiversity. In the long run, loss of pollinators could create a shift in vegetation with plant reproduction favored by wind pollination. Wind-pollinated species include grasses and pine trees, which tend to be more fire-prone. Long before European honeybees were introduced in the colonies in 1622, 4,000 species of native bees, in addition to butterflies and other insects, pollinated flowers in what is now the U.S. The majority of these bees, 90 of which call the San Francisco Bay Area home, are solitary and ground nesting. Commercial farming practices, which provide much of the food consumed by the population, have had detrimental impacts to pollinators over the past 80 years. In the urban environment, loss of habitat, pesticide use, and prioritizing plant aesthetics over function has also impacted populations. But urban areas are also in a position to transform quicker than areas dominated by commercial agricultural production and could potentially hold the key to protecting biodiversity. Landscapes that are more fire resistant don't have to be biological dead zones. We can have both fire resistant and ecologically beneficial yards. We're being asked to remove plants that tend to have a higher fire risk. Well-maintained and irrigated plants are almost always safer than ones that are drought-stressed or poorly maintained. That said, some species are more difficult to properly maintain due to characteristics like high leaf litter and dead woody interiors as they age. Many of these plants do not support biodiversity and are non-natives, so removing them and replacing with better selections can be a win-win. Transforming your garden into a fire-smart and biodiverse landscape may seem like a daunting task, so make a plan to tackle it in steps to maximize your maintenance dollars and minimize your time investment. Start with undesirable plants in the Zone 0, within 5 feet of structures. The ones that Fire Safe Marin recommends be removed due to their tendency to build up dried material. An example are these black acacia trees overhanging this garage. This invasive species has a lot of dried material in the canopy and on the ground during fire season. The benefits of shading the garage from afternoon sun and some bird nesting activity did not justify the fire hazard and limited biodiversity they help to support. There were much better options for this location. The trees were removed and replaced with Ceanothus, a native tree, and smaller natives including salvias and Douglas iris. Ceanothus is an early blooming plant that evolved with native bees and supports them with nectar and pollen after their post-winter emergence. In addition, it's relatively slow growing and can be easily kept pruned at an appropriate distance from the garage. There's still work to do around this planting bed. The vine needs to be cut back, and ideally the fence would be replaced with a non-combustible material. But take it one step at a time and prioritize the biggest hazards to your home. From a bee perspective, density of plant type is important. Bees prefer to forage on a single plant type on any single foraging trip. Larger patches, at least 3 feet by 3 feet when the plants are mature, will attract the most bees. If you like the look of dense plantings and the beneficial insects they support, you can take advantage of annuals that emerge in the spring when it's cool and wet. They will reseed and die back prior to fire season. In fact, other than ensuring dried planting material is removed by fire season, you may have to do nothing else, including watering. You can collect seeds from annual plants that you and the pollinators enjoy. You'll save money. Just collect the seeds when dry and store in a paper bag. You can distribute in desired locations in the fall or trade seeds with friends. That's it. Removing plants with little ecological benefit but that create a fire risk can create opportunity. Oleanders, not native to North America, provide little ecological benefit to native species. In addition, the hedge laddered between the front privet hedge and the home. In this case, a loquat tree was transplanted from a bed next to the house and was placed where an oleander hedge was removed. The loquat tree provides pollen and nectar for pollinators in late fall and fruit in the spring. Try to select a variety of plants that provide pollen and nectar during different times of the year. To maximize the benefits to pollinators, it's often best to plant the straight species as opposed to cultivars. Many cultivars have been selected and bred for aesthetics, but would be unable to reproduce without human assistance because their pollen and nectar is unavailable to pollinators. If you need help, just observe which plants you see the bees visiting. They'll let you know what they prefer. A final comment. One of the easiest ways you can protect pollinators is to eliminate chemical use in the garden. A pesticide is a pesticide, and you may be harming beneficial insects as well as polluting our waterways. For advice on less toxic alternatives, reach out to Our Water, Our World. Fire safety can be both beautiful and support biodiversity. We can have it all with careful planning.
Okay, so I'm going to move on just to make a couple other points, and then we'll get to our Q&A. And I just want to show you a picture. This is that planting bed 1 year later where the acacia were removed. The vine still needs to be dealt with, that's true. But here we have a lot of annuals coming up. The ceanothus is starting to grow. You can't really see all the native salvias in there because of the annuals, but they're going to die back again for fire season. So that green, beautiful, lush landscaping is going to go into a place where we've got, plant separation, which is what we want to see during fire season. But in the meantime, there's all these beautiful native annuals that the bees, many native bees, are taking care of. So, Todd talked about this as well. Like, many people in their concern for fire safety are concerned with some of their mature trees. But the fact is that mature trees have many benefits, and the fire professionals here really recognize that they do have these benefits. I mean, they include, they can shade and cool our homes, which can reduce our energy use and cost. They protect these understory plants and insect communities that grew up in their shade and these shadows, where if you remove them quickly, you could, really decimate that. Their established root system can help with slope stability and can also help with minimizing erosion, not just because of that slope stability through their roots, but also, raindrops hitting the leaves before they hit the ground and slowing that is going to help with our erosion problems. It could reduce soil desiccation during hot summer months, so less water for the plants that are underneath there, and also, possibly more fire resistance because there's more moisture in those soils, with less watering that we have to do, and also carbon sequestration. So mature trees have a lot of value. And as Todd said, usually if they're limbed up and just deadwooded and properly maintained, and from the pictures he showed, they really can be quite fire resistant. Now, there sometimes can be undesirable trees. And sometimes, just like with those black acacias, sometimes while limbing up may be a preferred option in deadwooding, it may not always be an option, especially close to structures. So in both these situations, very close to structures and limbing them up in an appropriate distance. It's not just 6 feet above the ground. You want to get it about 10 feet above a roof line and away from those buildings. So trying to limb up these trees that were planted way too close to structures would actually create an unsafe tree condition. So in these conditions, yes, removal might be best. Now, if you have an undesirable tree that you have in a location, what you might want to do, and I apologize, I'm not sure why this is here. What we want to consider is succession planting. So if you have a tree in both these conditions, this is a green wattle acacia, very large tree that has provided a lot of shade for the home. It's a southern exposure, really cools it during the summer, prevents that desiccation that I talked about. On this side here, on the right picture, we have a blackwood acacia. So not desirable. It's more than 30 feet away from the structure, so it really doesn't have to be removed, but at the same time is not providing much ecological benefit, even though it is providing some shading for the understory plants that have grown up around it. In both these situations, if you really do want to remove a tree, what you can do is plant a tree, a preferred species, under those trees before you actually remove the established tree. And in this case, there's 2 different trees here that have been planted. And in 6 to 7 years, those root systems will be established. This is very similar to a forest situation. So that root system can get established, and that tree is really ready to take a prominent position once those trees are removed, and which can also help protect those understory plants and insect communities and lots of things. So if you do a succession planting, an undesirable tree ideally will be removed in fall or winter when you have shorter days, cooler temperatures. That's going to cause less stress to the understory plants as well as the succession tree. You'll be outside of bird nesting season, and you're getting that natural rainfall that's going to help irrigate the plants below and get them through. You know, we really do have an opportunity right now. A lot of our landscapes have very few native plants. They do not help support biodiversity very well. And many of them, like some of the species that Todd showed in his, the Italian cypress, our bamboo, the junipers, they're just more fire prone. They may be also drought tolerant, but the fire prone doesn't really work. So removing those and replacing with native plants is really a win-win for everyone. Here I've got a great resource that you can check out is calscape.org. This is the California Native Plant Society put this together, and you can actually look by zip code to find plants that are native to your very specific area. This is a picture I took yesterday just north of the Petaluma Point Raised Road of the Acacia Reservoir, which is really more like a pond at this point. You know, you can see our beautiful lush green hills. This should be out to the edges here. I mean, we're here at the end of winter going into our dearth, or will be going into our dearth. This should be full. It's not full at all. So how do we conserve water while we're thinking about planting? Well, fall is an ideal planting time here. We have 2 seasons of root growth. There's spring for the fall and spring. So with our dry summer Mediterranean climate, by planting in the fall, your plants get the benefit of a fall root growth season, as well as the winter rains for irrigation, and then spring root growth before we go into our summer dearth period. So especially this year, as we look ahead to how we can not only maintain fire-safe landscapes, but also conserve water, that's a great way to do it. This is a great time to be planning for what you need to remove or clean up, and then thinking ahead to fall and planning for what plants you want to encourage. And I just want to encourage you, you know, when we really think about a lot of our native plants, rather than removing them like our native baccharis, our coyote bush, which when it's older can have a lot of woody debris that is not so fire safe. However, it's such an important, these native plants, all these insects that evolve with them, and even our non-native honeybees, so important. As a beekeeper, when I teach beginning beekeeping and I talk about the seasons, I talk about the season, which in our area is basically February to May, right now when conditions are optimal with lots of nectar and pollen. Then we have our summer dearth, and then we have coyote bush season. And that's a whole season in and of itself. It's so important. There are at least 400 different insect species that utilize this plant. So rather than removing it, you can keep it in a pretty fire safe manner. For those older plants like this one that has a lot of dead wood in here, you can literally cut it to the ground and it will come back from the roots and from the planting stalks that you cut it down to. And the young growth, these really waxy, thick leaves are relatively fire resistant. So you can maintain things in a way maintain plants that are very important to our biodiversity in a fire safe manner. And for more information on fire safe landscaping, you can check out the Marin Master Gardeners website. They've recently updated it with a lot of great information. And please tune in to next month's webinar when Faye Mark will be talking about this. So, in reality, all plants can burn. It's really how you maintain them. And so you can learn more through the Master Gardeners. It's tough though when we talk about a balance, because insect nesting and overwintering habitat is kind of not compatible with some of our wanting to clean things up for fire hazards. This here is clearly not okay. And this picture, I should say, was taken on the East Coast. So a little bit different scenario. We do need to keep things maybe not so clean to help our insects. A lot of them, that overwintering habitat is so important in the leaf litter and in brush and debris. Those dried plant stalks, as shown here, a lot of our native bees will nest in them, in those dried plant stalks. They'll lay their eggs and their pupa will overwinter in them. But keep it away from 30 feet away from the structures, and do it in islands that don't provide continuous fire fuels. But important to keep it around if you can. Another important just environmental consideration is erosion and slopes. You really don't have to choose between fire and landslides. You just have to plan carefully. We have very heavy clay soils here, and there's a lot of benefits to having vegetation on them. So really be careful, especially in the fall. You don't want to be clearing all your vegetation and taking it down where you could potentially create a hazardous landslide situation. A lot of us live on slopes here. So be very concerned about how you allow your water to slow, spread, and sink into the soil. And if you're in between finishing a project where you're taking out plants and letting new ones get established, there's a lot of different methods, including using straw wattles, as shown here, to really help slow that water down so that you don't create a hazardous condition. And one last note I want to make is, if you are concerned about making your property a habitat for biodiversity, the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation has an excellent habitat assessment guide for pollinators, which will kind of help you look at your yard and grade it and see where you can do better. So some key ones are, remove exotic, this is the low-hanging fruit. Remove exotic plants that are more fire prone. So the blackwood acacia, the juniper, the bamboo, the Italian cypress, and replace it with native plants. The native plants are going to have the same kind of drought tolerant nature, but they're going to support biodiversity at the same time. Also, just native plants play a really important role in preserving that biodiversity. I mean, the local insects have a relationship with them. So rather than remove them, maintain the established plants to reduce your fire risk. And you really do want to keep your mature trees. There's a lot of benefit to them. Keep them, but limb them up and get rid of that dead wood. And again, planting in fall, a lot of people, they think about spring as the perfect time for planting, but with our Mediterranean climate here in our area, actually the ideal time to plant is fall, when they can take advantage of fall root growth, winter rains, and spring root growth before it goes into our summer dirt period.